already. Doctors say you should put it in.
Oh.
So that the count is clear.
Good morning, comrades. Good morning to members of the press. Thank you for coming to this press conference and to covering it. You are covering a press conference that seeks to clearly state the civil society position on Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Bill number 2. And we will read our statement and then entertain questions from the press and other colleagues, and we will ask the President of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, Comrade to read the press statement, and then we will entertain questions from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, comrades, and thank you, members of the press, for coming. And I will be reading the joint civil society statement on the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 2 bill. We, the undersigned civil society organizations in Zimbabwe, note with serious concern the passing of the controversial Constitution Amendment Bill number 2 by the National Assembly on 20 April 2021. It is very disturbing that the proposed amendments to the Constitution are being introduced at a time when the May 2013 Constitution has not been fully implemented. The amendments relate to critical thematic areas that includes the appointment and retirement of members of the judiciary, appointment of the head of prosecution, removal of running mate provisions, extension of proportional representation, provisions for female parliamentarians, composition of executive and legislative oversight role, among other amendments. Since the introduction of the bill, we, the undersigned CSOs, have expressed our reservations to this process and made several calls on all progressive citizens and duty bearers to reject this bill as it reverses the gains that were ushered in by the 2013 Constitution. The adoption of this bill will undoubtedly centralize too much power in the executive, particularly the president. Besides widening the scope of presidential powers and undermining democratic accountability, this bill unilaterally increases the size of central government and imposes an unprecedented burden on the already suffering citizenry. Taxpayers will bear the primary burden of a bloated government. The proposed amendments on the promotion of judges to the superior courts and extension of tenure of office for judges over 70 years will greatly compromise the independence of the judiciary. The proposed sections of the amendment bill are a backward step in the pursuit of democracy, accountability, the divisions of governmental power, representativeness, the rule of law, and human rights in Zimbabwe. The adoption of the bill entails further strengthening of the president's powers while weakening the mechanisms intended to hold the president to account for his or her actions, wrongdoing, and in some cases illegal conduct. The adoption of the bill also sets precedents to future and further amendments of the Constitution, which will additionally undermine the democratic and civic space in Zimbabwe. Hence, the undersigned CSOs condemn this development. In essence, the amendment bill dilutes democracy. It weakens the rule of law. It undermines the promotion and protection of human rights in Zimbabwe, particularly those of a civil and political nature. At this juncture, the country is supposed to be focusing on alignment of laws to the new constitution, fully implementing provisions of the constitution and not amending it. We, the undersigned CSOs in Zimbabwe, call for alignment of laws with the constitution. The amendments are a mockery to democracy, a recipe for disaster, and a violation of the principle of separation of powers. The undersigned CSOs in Zimbabwe therefore call on all progressive citizens to 1. Condemn and reject this amendment through all appropriate legal means. 2. Call on state actors to fully implement provisions of the Constitution. 3. Call on those responsible within government to fully align all laws with the Constitution. And 4, hold to account one way or the other their representatives in the National Assembly who voted for the amendment. And this is our statement. There are a number of CSOs who have signed to this statement. In fact, we are 46 CSOs cutting across all sectors of the progressive movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Mtasa. We therefore invite questions from members of the press. Any questions? Seeking clarity?
Yeah, I just want to know, what are you going to do about this thing amended? It has been amended. What action are you going to take as a society?
Okay, that's question number 1. As the Congress digest and process, do we have another question or we can respond to it? What are we going to do? So that question has got 2 parts to it. So we'll ask, there are 2 sides to it. There's the technical legal part, that's where the lawyers will respond, and also the political actions that we have to take as civil society and citizens. And we'll also get that response from, so we'll ask Dr. Kika from the forum to respond to the technical end.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maria, and thank you, members of the press. As you would probably have picked, there has been a legal challenge already that has been mounted by civil society against Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment Bill number 2. That bill was passed illegally for a number of reasons. The main being, the bill in its original formulation was subsequently amended. In the week of the 20th of April, when the bill was passed by the lower house, the bill had undergone some amendments. In essence, certain things had been added that were not originally in the original bill, while a few things were added. What Parliament can do is subtract from the bill as opposed to add new things. Because if new things are to be added, Section 328 of the Constitution requires that 90-day notice period. It also requires us to go back to the process of public consultations, because you cannot simply amend an amendment bill that has been taken to public consultations already and is back and add new things that were not there when the public was consulted. So there is already legal action before the courts. As to the outcome of that legal action, we of course cannot foretell. It all depends with how the courts, how our judges reads the Constitution and how they decide as to move forward with this issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Kiga. Comments from the last? What's the action? The question is, what do we do? What are we going to do in response to this?
Thank you very much, Comrade Maria. I think from the onset we've made our position clear that this amendment has nothing to do with the people of Zimbabwe, except for one citizen of this country, who is Emmerson Mnangagwa. And that is where we're taking our fight to. This is a fight between the people of Zimbabwe and Emmerson Mnangagwa. And that is a fight we are willing to mobilize our students, young people, and every other citizen of this country to take the fight back to Mnangagwa, because he is seeking to undermine the democratic values of this country. He is seeking to eviscerate everything that is left of our democracy. And therefore, it is the duty of the students' movement and every other progressive Zimbabwean in this country to mobilize, conscientize, and make sure that every young person, every citizen in this country is aware of the dangers that are posed by this amendment. So that is what we are primarily engaged on right now, making sure that every citizen is aware of what is happening in this country, to make sure that we mobilize towards radical action against this bill.
Thank you.
So we need to learn from our history and appreciate that there is no freedom, prosperity, equality, justice, and equity that has been experienced by any people without fighting for it. So Zimbabwe was once under colonial rule. It is the collective actions of people, the determination and persistence of the citizens, the indigenous people, that brought some form of independence to this country. South Africa was under apartheid. It is the collective actions. There were students as young as primary school students, Hector Peterson, as young as secondary school students. There were university students, there were peasants, there were labor movements, communities, indigenous organizations. All of them, they came together and fought for their freedom. We have many examples across the continent, across the region. But even if we look at ourselves in terms of this 2013 constitution that we are talking about, it did not come at the benevolence of the dictator. It came through many actions and many persistent campaigns, programs. You remember in 1997 we had the National Constitutional Assembly, and throughout the years until 2013 it has been fighting for one thing, that we need a new constitution. Now that we have a new constitution, we need to entrench constitutionalism. There's a difference between just having a constitution and entrenched constitutionalism. What we need is now to fight, all of us, and fight for transformative constitutionalism. We want to see the constitution being alive. So we have no option. There's no any other option. I'm telling this to labor, I'm telling this to students, I'm telling this to all progressive women's organizations. There is no option besides coming together. We need to unite and make sure that we fight. There is another point that we need to urgently deal with. Many people across the country are not aware of what is happening in the citadel of dictatorship in Harare, there in the parliament, which is no longer so honorable. We need to spread this message in languages that people understand, and it is a collective responsibility. It is only when people are informed, empowered, and understand what is happening will we get everyone standing up for their rights. So that is another point we need to urgently push forward. But what is important is we need to fight against this amendment and use all our organizations, all our resources, intellectual capacity, and unity. In fighting, we are going to get reprisal, we are going to face many challenges. What is going to make sure that we succeed is solidarity, which must be the glue that should unite us. So it's no longer going to be Namata Ekwepes there shouting about against amendment, Chiriga there shouting in this corner. We need a collective approach, and this press conference and the testimony that 46 organizations have come together to say this is not on is the starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade President. You speak of the need for a broad alliance of the progressive citizens, students, the women's movement, and all citizens. And that is part of the action is part of organizing as broad as civil society. We are, as a crisis coalition and together with other progressives, talking about the need of bringing everyone together to fight this fight for constitutionalism. But it's not as if we've not been doing anything. I think we need to underline this as civil society, that this law has been passed by Parliament after they did an outreach by Parliament, right? There was a parliamentary outreach where they were consulting citizens on the contents of that bill, and it was rejected by the citizens. And there's a report in Parliament that is very clear that the citizens rejected this bill in total, but still they've gone ahead to pass it nonetheless. So we mobilized citizens to go to every public hearing that was taking place in Zimbabwe. Citizens went there, the women said they do not want this quota system because the constitution already provides for it already. And all the aspects that are in the amendment were rejected by the citizens during the public hearings that took place. So we've been mobilizing, organizing, and engaging and making sure that we get our voices heard. But we realize that maybe the voices that are heard most by dictatorship is the voice of the citizens organized, united together on the streets and everywhere else where they can understand that once citizens say they don't want the actions of the state, then the state has to listen. So we are very clear on this. We are going to organize. We're not just talking about it because we've got a press conference. We're talking about it because we've already been doing it, and we're going to organize to reject this amendment, number one, to make sure that this constitution is not implemented, those aspects of the constitution that are repressive, but also to ensure that the state implements the progressive components of the constitution, and the citizens are organizing and mobilizing to make sure that we resist this. And this is the reason why we ask you to also be part of the movement. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. Madam Forum are also participating virtually. They send a statement that we will play for the benefit of
fellow citizens and friends. Thank you for an invitation to participate in this presser. We as Abameli are honored to be part of this presser. We meet at a difficult time in the history of our nation. We are meeting today concerned as citizens of Zimbabwe, as the people of Zimbabwe, in that we are seeing a determined mutilation of our constitution. We had a constitution that took so much time from 2009 to 2013 to come into being. People clearly, without equivocation, expressed themselves as to the governance charter that they wanted to govern the state, to run the affairs of the state. It is a document that is binding on all of us, whether we hold public office or not. It is a document that is so sacrosanct that should not be tinkered with as and when we please. It is a document that we should hold so highly. It is a document that we should only accept when it is clearly necessary, that we can then amend. As things stand now, there appears to be no basis insofar as we are concerned as our men to have this document amended. There are two amendments that are being pushed, which are critical to this discussion, to this presser. The first concerns the extension of offices of those who have been appointed judges. Clearly, there is no basis that we should have such an amendment, because primarily we have so many lawyers who are equally qualified to hold these important offices of the state, who are qualified to be appointed as judges in this country. There is no basis that we should have those people who have attained a retirement age to continue in those offices. So it's an unnecessary amendment. There is nothing that special about them. Zimbabwe has so many lawyers that are being produced daily within and without Zimbabwe. All those people are qualified to go into those offices and serve the state. There is the amendment of the running mate clause that was due to come into effect in 2023. That was put in place primarily so as to resolve a problem that has repeatedly dogged Zimbabwe, the problem of succession. And we've seen what happens when there is no clear-cut path to succession. We do not want a repeat of that. We cannot go back to the old days where there was no clarity. As such, there is no rational basis for that clause to be amended in the manner that is proposed. There are other amendments that are also proposed. In essence, the stance of our mainly is that all those are not necessary. Let's only have necessary changes. There are clauses in respect of the devolution, part of clauses in the Constitution. The reality is that there is no devolution. No matter what you do, whether you seek to amend and bring in something that is not there, what is being proposed is not devolution. What is proposed is just a Frankenstein monster. Is something that we really do not need. When we have to have amendments, we should have proper amendments. So colleagues, we have to defend the Constitution. We have to use whatever we have within our means, primarily for those of us as lawyers who will go to court, who will challenge these. If the people come forward, we need our assistance because we think these are necessary amendments. I thank you, colleagues. I thank you, friends, for affording me this opportunity to speak to you today. Unfortunately, I have not been able to be with you in person. It would have been better that I be there in person, but all the same, colleagues, I have faith in you that we'll have a successful press. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, further elaborations from members of the press? Yes.
I just want to find out, as civil society, your comment considering that some of the opposition members of parliament are in support of the bill. And my second question is, in your own view, why do you think Mnangagwa wants power to appoint judges in what he calls a new dispensation?
Okay. I don't know how to answer that question. I'll do that.
Thank you. Maybe I can speak to the second question that you have raised around power to appoint judges. The judicial office is an important office in any constitutional democracy. More so in Zimbabwe because of the trajectory that we have traversed in the last few years and last 2 decades essentially, where we have seen the judiciary act as power brokers, primarily because of our contested elections. In the last so many elections, elections have been going to court for determination, particularly the presidential election. 2018 is a fresh memory. It was the Constitutional Court that eventually decided who was to be president. Because in Zimbabwe elections remain contested, we are still far from proper electoral reforms. we are likely going to see another contested election in 2023, where the Constitutional Court is called upon to determine who eventually takes presidential office. In terms of our Constitution, it's only the Constitutional Court that can decide a presidential election dispute. So in anticipation of that, one would imagine the president would want to ensure that there are judges that are beholden to him in that Constitutional Court, elected, promoted to that office by him, who will then have to decide who becomes president in the case of a likely presidential election dispute. So it's a clear exercise to us of judicial capture. It's a clear exercise of pecking the judiciary. One of the reasons why we very much believe there is an attempt to tinker with extension of tenure beyond retirement age is to ensure that certain individuals in particular are there in that court come 2023. Thank you, Chair.
Right, so the other point that we need to point out is that it's not always that the judiciary is captured for political reasons. And this is a point that we want all progressive organizations and people to understand, and the ordinary people. No one is spared. It takes a compromised judiciary to certify public policy, economic policies like the reintroduction of the Zimbabwean dollar, which has pauperized all the working class, which is quite unfair to the peasants, those who are buying their inputs using US dollars, but are forced to sell their tobacco, their cotton, their maize in useless RTGS. Eventually, that class conflict and contradictions will eventually land on the desks of the judges. And for a government that has taken a clear fascism approach in terms of policy, in terms of social and economic policies, they understand the importance of the judiciary. And this is why workers have to demand an independent and uncompromised judiciary. This is why peasants have to demand an independent judiciary. Eventually, the dispute in Chilonga will see its day in court. The dispute about land rights in Linde, in Wanke, will see its day in the courts. So there are a number of issues. The main one is the political one. But people who want political power, and lots of it, they don't just want it for fun. They want it for the economic benefits, like we are seeing the looting and everything that is happening. So this is a point that we want to stress to those who think that it's a matter for politicians. It's a matter for workers. It's a matter for public sector and private sector workers. Those who are now earning $20 US, those who are now earning $9 US, only sufficient to buy 9 loaves of bread. Those whose minimum wages have been reduced to $25 US and only sufficient to buy 25 loaves of bread. Those who have gone to court and judiciary pronouncing that SI 33, SI 85, SI 185, and SI 142 that ensured that prices of goods and services, taxes and user fees are in US dollars, but only the salaries of workers are in RTGS. It is the judge. Judges work on a philosophy. They work on an ideology. And we don't want the ideology of the ruling class to taint the independence of the judges. So that's the other issue. The second point on those who are siding with the movers of the amendments, it is expected. There's never been any struggle without its tentacles, without its sellouts. But what we can pronounce openly is that those people are selling out, because the Constitution Amendment number 20 of 2013 was a long process. It came through a long process. That process included consultations of all of the citizens. That process includes a referendum. So anyone who has been appointed or elected by the citizens and sits in the Senate or in the Parliament, House of Assembly, and does not realize the need for consultations, the need for a referendum before the Constitution is amended, there is no any other characterization of that person. They are sellouts. They are the Morrison Nyatis of the liberation struggle, and they are everywhere. So we must be very clear as citizens that we are not going to side with those who are not siding with us, and that has to be open. And I'm sure you have seen some of them trying to come back after citizens raise voices. So we need also to raise our voices against those who are aiding and enabling the amendment of the People's Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Professor, is there any, what impact does it have on elections? The amendment, just quickly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the press. I think I will again allude to what Judicial has just said around the issues of elections. We are looking at issues of, to do with succession and then the election dispute resolution. That is a hearing in terms of the appointments of judges, whereby the executive would have control, and the executive is also a ruling party candidate for any election. So in that regard, we see a tilted playing field. It doesn't promote fair playing field for the candidate that will actually be participating in the electoral processes. And in the event that there is an electoral dispute, again, you would see that the same candidates would be going to the courts, and the courts would have been appointed by in a partisan system. So again, we are seeing a playing field that is not even as we prepare for 2023. The consolidation of power is what we are actually seeing now. Thank you.
Do you have any questions further? Yes.
Okay, some of the critics of the not so new constitution, they have argued that the constitution has too much gaps and it is prone to amendments time and again. As civil society, do you think that there are challenges in as far as our constitution was structured from 2013, such that it is prone to amendments time and again? Do you think it's a challenge of the constitution or not?
Thank you. It's a technical question. Ask the lawyers to answer first and then we come.
Yes, constitutions can be amended everywhere in the world, and constitutions should be a living document reflecting the interests and the aspirations of a nation. But when these amendments are done, I think there should be consensus among all citizens that the amendments are necessary and they are in the interest of the country, in terms of the governance aspect of the country, in terms of the general interest that we have in the country. We have alluded to the fact that there are gaps in terms of the current constitution, the 2018 constitution. We are not aware of those gaps of the 2018 constitution because, to me, this was endorsed by citizens through a referendum, and who is there to define these gaps, to say there are these gaps that need to be addressed and so on. But we are saying, since the constitution is a living document, if there are any gaps that have been identified, let's build consensus across citizens, across the whole country, for the need for the amendments. Let's motivate those amendments. Let's have robust discussions across the whole country on the amendments. Then those changes can be effected if there are really gaps that are there. And what we are saying is any amendment should be done to improve the document, to make it a better document, not for any other interest or for any other purpose.
I think it's very clear when we were campaigning for a new democratic constitution since 1999 and we were very clear that one of the major issues was that there was too much power in the office of the executive, right? This is because since the amendment that took place in 1987. the creation of the executive presidency. And that has been a major issue. When power is centered, there's too much power in one office. And that was the major fight, so that we wanted that office to be accountable, right? The three pillars of the state to balance power in that regard. But now we see a reversal. So that is where our problem is, where there's this reversal, where power is now being taken back again to create an imperial president. And that is the greatest challenge. It affects the judiciary. We've got young people that are in prison now, right? We've got Joanna Momombe, we've got Cecilia Chimbiri, we've got Makumbora Zivishe. People have lost confidence in the judiciary. So if anything, we expect the state to have actions that create confidence in such arms of the state, right? So that people have confidence in the judiciary, they can go to the judiciary for recourse. But when citizens constantly lose confidence in the judiciary, then what happens? That is where our problem is. So we want to go to court and feel that when we are in court, the president has no say on the judgment that the judges or the magistrates are going to. It is going to be done professionally, independently, so that citizens enjoy their rights. So that's one gap that we continue to emphasize. We do not want an imperial president. Zimbabwe is not a chiefdom, right? Zimbabwe is a democracy. The constitution is sought to create a more democratic society. And in a democratic society, people are held to account. How do you, I don't even understand, you ask about the people that voted from the progressives, but even Parliament, how does Parliament vote to take away its powers and give them to the executive? One of them, whether it's MP of MDC, was that amendment where they are taking away powers from Parliament to provide oversight over the borrowing, right? The debt that is indicated by the Senate. But all parliamentarians agree that let's take away all our powers to provide oversight on the executive and give it to the executive. Indeed, they've been voted by the citizens. So there's a problem with that. So in as far as we are concerned, we do not want to create an executive president. We want power to be shared. And we want citizens to hold bearers to account. And that is our responsibility. And I think Senator wants to.
Thank you. I believe it is not about, it is less about how porous the constitution can be as far as amendments are concerned. But it is about two issues. Number one, it is about a very corruptible human being who is so much into the love of absolute power. It is about someone who would wish, if it was within their means, they would even abolish every other institution, and they would become the judiciary, they would become the prosecution, they would become everything. So it is exactly about someone, it is about a corruptible human being who wants absolute power. It is about a dictator who so much wanted to be president for the sake of enjoying power, more than for the sake of making sure that the citizens of this country have better welfare. Number two, this is less about how porous this constitution is. Like you have said before, we have seen people who are trading. You asked the question about the opposition trying to support the amendments. This is more about people who rather go for the crumbs more than they would go for the entire law, for the entire banquet. Like you have said, we've seen people saying that they support this amendment because it is a youth quota, it is a women's quota. But they are forgetting that there is a total evisceration of our democracy. So it is about people who would rather rush to get the crumbs that will fall below the table, which is the 10 youth seats in parliament. So there are people in this country who do not care about our democracy, who would rather have 2 of the 10 seats, the crumbs under the table, and forget about having an independent judiciary, having electoral reforms, and having every other pillar for democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we are rounding up. Do you have any other questions? In the absence of questions, we want to thank members of the press for coming to this press conference, and thank the panelists here who are civil society representatives for answering your questions. I think you were well answered. If you would want to follow up, you can still engage post this conference for interviews and engagements. But thank you very much, members of the press. I think our position is clear as civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.